Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the September 16th, 2021 City Council regular meeting to order. Will Councilmember Martinelli please lead us in the pledge?
Pledge of allegiance to the flag
of
of the United States
of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all. Thank you, and please let the record show that all council members are present. This takes us forward to our roll call, our correspondence. And it looks like we have, has anyone signed up to, is there any written correspondence or?
Mayor, no written correspondence, but we have plenty of written.
Okay. No time for the comments from the written public comment to be entered into the record.
Thank you, Mayor. The following have provided written public comment. Joyce Baker Ramirez, SR3 complaint letters. William Schott, proposed marina development. Emily Lafferty, Stephen J. Underwood Park. Patrick Nardo, itinerant food trucks. Susan Didinsky, Director of Environmental Strategy Proposal. Elizabeth and Malcolm Byrne, Environmental Strategist. The following Community Public Health and Environmental Rescue Plan, Molly Barnes, James and Patricia Davis, Carmen Richter, and Bill Villela. The following have provided public comment on the doing workers
at Desert Hazard Pay. Kathy Bond, Patty Calkins, Gabrielle Steele, Kimberly Cole, Elizabeth Berger, Megan Person,
Jordan Fitch,
Megan Hampton, Lauren Kiaker, Caleb Heinrichs, Letitia Lambert, David Lee, Ian Hotel, Yagathi Manu, Son Johnson,
Samantha Maxton,
Craig
Craig
Metcalf,
Metcalf,
Paula Poe, Evelyn Rubio, Susan Jo Bruner, Megan Schiller, Stefan Megan Schregel, Rick Sotor, Keisha Thomas, Sue Zong, Nicholas Landon, Brian
McGee,
Anna Whitney, Randy Richard, Christopher Ekinezar, Casey Sinead, Laverne Phillips Andrews, Rachel Mahar, Nicole Wilson, and Burley Deanna Diaz.
yes.
The following have provided public comment
On the Francis Saltwater State Park proposal.
Peter Booth, Stevie Byers, Rhoda Green, Teresa
Hudgens,
Curtis
Curtis Johnson,
Robert and Catherine Weaver, Robert McMichael,
Michael,
Jackie
Jackie
Myers,
Myers,
Stephanie
Stephanie Solowska, and Randy Williams.
And Mayor, we have Joe Shock who would like to give verbal public comment tonight. The mayor in the meeting.
Okay, before I turn it over to public comment, I'd just like to make sure that people are aware that when we take comments from the public, we just like to remind those that any personal, impertinent or slanderous remarks or who become boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the council will be muted and removed. But, and most of all, there's a window of three minutes to speak. So I don't see this individual on my screen.
Under Bill Shot, they're on the screen.
Okay. Hello, and you are welcome to start your comments. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm Joe and my husband, Bill Schott. We live at 22315 6th Avenue South, Unit A104, which is in the South Shores building. And that's our concern with the adaptive purpose building. We think the overall marina plan is very good. We've read through many of the proposals and the drafts and the RFQs, but we're still very concerned about the height of this adaptive purpose building. In the April 8th Bunzell presentation regarding this building, it states in writing, quote, won't block views from the condos, unquote, and quote, keeping the roof line below the condo's first floor, unquote. It also suggested stacking the boats 2 to 3 boats high. However, recent updates and the RFQ have eliminated that language and even suggest stacking the boats 3 to 4 boats high. It sounds like you may already be thinking to go higher with this building. It would be more reassuring to have the original language of April 8th in writing to discourage some developer who might pressure the council to ignore citizens' concern and build higher. Lastly, I would like to invite any of those developers or designers to come to my condo, see my view and from my lanai, and to fully appreciate how to best design this building with citizens and neighbors' interests in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, this now takes us forward to the city manager's report. City Manager Matthias, you have the floor.
You'd think I'd get used to the Zoom by now, but I always panic when you say that. So good evening. We have 4 items I want to talk about briefly, since there's a lot to do tonight. One thing I want to mention, and we're still establishing what time this will occur, but on Veterans Day, November 11th, we anticipate having a ceremony at Stephen J. Underwood Park to honor the service flags that are being placed there to enhance and expand the memorial to Officer Underwood, and also to honor veterans throughout the city and from any location who are interested in coming and participating in such a critical day in U.S. history. So we're excited we're going to be able to do that this year. I want to, on your consent item is a contract to extend our judges' tenure here. I just want to say that Judge Lisa is a phenomenal judge, brings honor to the city in the manner in which she conducts herself in the court. We have an incredible court staff. Jennifer does a great job. Has been acknowledged as Court Administrator of the Year. Melissa does the same in the probation side. One of the items on the ARPA tonight will be making the court whole with money that's been lost through lack of collection of fines and other things. But Judge Lisa has essentially established a virtual court that functions and is a model for other cities. So I just wanted to call her out and let the council know kind of how pleased we are with the performance of all of that. What I want to do next is invite Nicole. We're going to have an update on the Parks, Recreation, Senior Services Master Plan.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Nicole Nordholm, Assistant Director of Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services. And I have 2 of our consultants here with AHBL. I have Wayne Carlson and Stephanie Hindmarch, and they have been helping out a ton, and we've been really working hard on this master plan update for 2022. And they have a brief presentation just to kind of update you on what's been going on.
Great, thank you. And it's good to see many of you again here this evening. We've had a variety of public engagement events, and I know I've seen many of the council members and quite a few of the folks in the public that are here this evening. So next slide, please. So as just a point of introduction, my name is Wayne Carlson. I'm a principal and planner with AHBL, and I've had the opportunity to work with the city for in a variety of capacities over the years, primarily with Denise over in community development. And part of our team also includes Brittany Port, who's not here today, as well as Stephanie. And we've been working with Susan Cesar, the Chief Strategic Officer, Nicole Nordholm, and Kyle Ellers on the update to the city's parks plan. Next slide. So just as a real quick background, the Park Recreation Open Space Plan is really a guiding document for Parks, Recreations, and Senior Services Department. It's a policy document, but that also includes a capital facilities component and public engagement. So almost think of it as a mini comprehensive plan for the park system. And the importance of it is that it allows you to be eligible for grants through the Washington State Department, the Recreation Conservation Office. So that's the key thing. And these plans expire every 6 years. Next slide. And so in a nutshell, the plan process includes community outreach. We've been to the farmers market a couple of times. We were at National Night Out over at Midway Park. We've been to the Senior Center and other places. It also includes an inventory and analysis of the park system. So when I said mini comprehensive plan, we do an inventory. We look at the population today, the demographics, mostly in terms of age, but the demographics, the population, projected growth, and try to understand the level of service that the city is providing for various parks and recreation activities. We collect program information in addition to physical inventory and analysis of the park system. And then we, through a public process, we identify future needs and future projects. Next slide.
So a little background on where we are in the process now. Like Wayne mentioned, we visited a couple of farmers markets. We also visited a kindergarten class at Midway Elementary and spoke to a couple of students there. We had that Midway Park open house event with Reach Out Des Moines for National Night Out. We had some pretty good participation there, both in person and via an online questionnaire. We had 2 open houses at the Activity Center last week. So pretty good engagement there as well. That included speaking to seniors at the lunch hour and an evening presentation to the general public. And there's also an active online questionnaire on the city website now, so people can still submit their feedback there. We've had stakeholder interviews with 6 different organizations, including Reach Out Des Moines, the Des Moines Area Food Bank, Highline College Agriculture Program, Wakalima USA, and Highline School District. We've been receiving email comments. Those continue to come in weekly. And we also just received results from a community survey that we have done. The survey was mailed to a random selection of households, and we received 410 responses on that. So we're currently reviewing those results now, and those will inform the planning process. We've also been working on that parks inventory and analysis.
Yeah, and before we move off this slide, I just wanted to mention something really quickly about the community survey. That is a statistically valid survey done by a firm that really specializes in these types of surveys for government offices, and particularly parks and recreation departments. So what they do is they send out the survey, and then when they don't get responses, they follow that up with text messages, emails, etc. So you probably heard a little bit about that as well, but that's kind of standard. Typically, it takes about 7 requests, or 7. You send it out to 7 to get 1 in, 1 back. So that's kind of the ratio that we're dealing with. And the design was to get 400 responses so that we would have a statistically valid survey. So I just want to give you a tiny bit of background. We're still waiting on the final kind of results and summary, but that's the mechanics of the survey, in case you heard some discussion among the community.
We've also been speaking with city staff on recreation programs and senior programming as well, to make sure that that's updated and reflected in the update. So there are a couple of key changes you'll see in the 2022 plan update. One of those is this community engagement process. Like we said, we've been reaching out to the community, have received quite a bit of engagement, and that will advise many of the other sections in the plan update. The vision statement is one of those. We're working on creating a new vision statement to reflect community goals and values. We've been discussing that with folks at the various events, and we'll be continuing to craft this vision statement to try and reflect what we've heard from the public. We're also going to see some updates to the level of service analysis. Typically in the past, this has been reflected as parks acreage per 1,000 residents. We're going to add another layer of analysis to that by comparing the city with similar sized cities using data from the National Recreation and Park Association. We're also going to see some changes just based on that new acreage that's been added at Midway Park, Van Gaskin Park, and Mary Gay Park since 2016. We also have some new residents since 2016, and that will be reflected in the analysis. And then we're also reviewing the acreages from the 2016 plan to make sure that those are accurate moving forward. We're going to be looking at the goals and policies in the 2016 plan and updating those. We're using the 2020 comprehensive plan policies as a starting point, and then we'll update those based on what we've been hearing from the public throughout the engagement process. And then finally, we'll be making sure that the plan update reflects the most recent capital improvements program, and we'll also be recommending some other projects and needs based on what we've heard from the public.
So the next steps in this plan will be to formalize recommendations based on the survey results and public input. So we'll be making recommendations that will be assembled into the draft plan. So we'll finalize a draft plan, and then we'll be bringing that to the City Council Municipal Facilities meeting, and then ultimately a final plan to the full council. So that's a kind of a thumbnail, and with the intention of getting this adopted right around the end of the year or sometime in hopefully in early January, so that we can have the city ready for any kind of grant request that it may choose to make before May of next year. So the Recreation and Conservation Office offers or solicits for grants every 2 years. And so, and those grants are due in early May. So anyway, that's where we're at. And so we have a web page and an email, and certainly comments, contacts, etc. could go to Parks Master Plan at DesMoinesWA.gov. And that next line shows you the URL, or essentially the website for this project.
I see Matt Mahoney. And then JC Harris. Okay, and then Martinelli. So start with Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Can we go a couple slides back to the forms of input you got right there? So on the community survey piece of this, now I received it in the mail, and I actually filled it out and sent it back in mail. And then not long after, I received it in a text message. Do you have that breakdown of what was from mail and what was from text?
I don't. I can find that out, but they also have a way of making sure that if you received it by mail and then got a text message that you weren't able to essentially make your points twice. But we can get that information to you.
Yeah, I wasn't. I just wanted to know the effectiveness of both. And
Sure.
Will this data talk about? I assume obviously it was comprehensive. It was sent across our city and the various neighborhoods and so forth. So that'll be interesting to see the data as far as desire for parks. I know we have sections of town that are a little lean, so it'll be interesting to hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Does the level of service analysis, is there anything involving demography in your work? It seems to me that the granting process, involves a lot of issues of equity and, children, seniors, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. The level of service standard is kind of a crude way of allowing a community to assess whether it's providing kind of adequate parks, recreation facilities for say a similar size city. Those thresholds though, and those level of service standards are often will be customized a bit based on a community's demography, and so we will be doing that as part of this plan. So, for instance, if you have a community of mostly retirees, it's not all that important to make sure you have the same number of skate parks per 1,000 people as a community with of a much younger population. So, generally speaking, level of service standards are a proxy, and then they get adjusted based on the demographics. And so I hope that answered your question.
So is there something supplemental that we could be doing or should be thinking about as a city? Some sort of study or research to try to find out, our population by neighborhood, different age groups and income levels and that sort of thing. Would that contribute meaningfully to, where you cited parks and various things?
We have that. We have census information at the block level. Mm-hmm. And so we are looking at that, and that has kind of age, race, and economic information. And so we'll know which of those census tracts and blocks have kind of more need or less need from an income perspective as well.
And that'll be in your report, you're saying?
Yeah, we will. We'll correlate the demographics in quite a bit of detail with spatially on the map.
That's great. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions I will email, but I just wanted to state that I am really impressed with the outreach that was done on this. It was really multifaceted, and I think that with some tweaks, it's really like a model that could be used for other issues when it comes to community input. And that's all I just wanted to say. I think it was an impressive job, and I look forward to seeing the data.
Great. Well, you ought to really thank Susan, Nicole, and Denise. This has been a multi-department process, and they designed it, and we've just been fortunate to help execute it.
Okay, I am not seeing any more hands at this time. Okay, so at this point, we are back to City Manager Mathias.
Right. And one thing I just want to point out, based on the questions that we received, that this is an interactive process, and it will be interactive with the council as well in determining the allocation of resources for the best interests of the city. That's your call. And this master plan helps us identify that. There's more pieces to it. And even in the ARPA, you'll see there's an opportunity perhaps to do some analysis. The last item that I have is very pleasurable opportunity to introduce our police chief to give council an update on some of our most recent activities with PD. So Chief, all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening. Bonnie is putting up a PowerPoint slide, and I just want to give a brief update on an organized crime investigation that we conducted this week at the police department. And you might say, hey, this is just an illegal marijuana grow. But I want to explain and go a little bit deeper into money laundering and other organized crime type activities. So go ahead, Bonnie. To the next slide, we did recover a passport from the People's Republic of China. And we do know through our investigation that money was being laundered through businesses in our region and then through banks and directly back to China from this illegal activity. Next slide. We did 2 search warrants on 2 different houses, one in the city of Des Moines and one in the city of Kent. And they were in fact illegally manufacturing marijuana. So we were assisted on this investigation by the Washington State Patrol and their marijuana eradication team. This is a grant-funded team to address illegal drug operations in states that have legalized marijuana, and to ensure that people are doing what has been legalized within the law and correctly, and not these outside illegal operations. Next slide. It's important to note, and this is a picture from one of the residents, those are garden hoses going down the stairs. And in the next slide, you'll see various chemicals that were used inside these rooms. We had to call out the Department of Ecology to ensure that the living conditions were safe. There were, in fact, 2 small children, a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, living in this environment. But as you can imagine, by spraying water and chemicals and an environment where plants are growing, over 500 plants were seized. It's essentially significantly damaging good houses in our community. And I can tell you that we are in the process, go ahead to the next one, Bonnie. We're in the process of seizing both of those houses, working with our city attorney's office, working with the King County Prosecutor's Office. This is a very active investigation, so I can't go too far into too many details, but I can tell you that we believe that we have in excess of $800,000 in assets that we have seized from this investigation. We have 3 bank accounts that we have frozen, and we have a safe deposit box key that we have, we're investigating and locating that safe deposit box. So we don't know what's in those additional accounts or that safe deposit box, but regardless of that, we have, we believe we have approximately $800,000 in assets seized. So these are criminals. This is illegal activity, and it's money being funneled illegally back to China, basically at the expense of our community. So I'm really happy with the work done by our detectives on this case. I can tell you there's more work to be done on this case, and there are other illegal enterprises out there that we're actively looking at. So I just wanted to give you a little update. Our officers did a great job on this.
Thank you, Chief. Other questions?
I have one noted from Councilmember Bangs.
Thank you, Chief. That's it's disturbing, but thank you for the details. Do we know if there were any local residents involved in this, or were they all from outside of the city, whether national, international, or not?
Yes, they were not local residents of our community.
Thank you.
Mayor, one comment I'd like to make, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the first time we've done this type of operation.
It certainly is the first time we've done this since I've been here as the chief, but I would imagine that there's been other cases in the past.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments? Great job. Thank you. And thank you guys. Like I know Randy was involved in. It's all excellent. And Mayor, that concludes the city manager's report.
Thank you. And what a testament to the team that we have. Will the clerk please read the consent agenda calendar?
Item 1, approval of vouchers. Item 2, approval of minutes. Item 3, confirmation of city manager's reappointment of Lisa Leon to the municipal court judge position. And that concludes the consent calendar, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Nutting.
Move to approve the consent calendar as read.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilmember Nutting, seconded by Deputy Mayor Mahoney. Are there any items that a council member wishes to remove? Seeing none. All those in favor of the consent agenda as read, please raise your hand until I call your name. Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. This passes 7-0. Okay. This takes us forward to old business. And the item that we have to discuss, first of all, is the second reading of draft ordinance number 21-035 related to the zoning code and regulation of emergency housing, shelters, and permanent supportive housing and transitional housing. We have a staff presentation by the Economic Relief and Resource Coordinator, Land Use Planner, Eric Lane. Eric, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. And as you mentioned, this is the second reading of draft ordinance 21-035 for the ESSHB 1220 code update. So just a quick little background of this and where we're at today. House Bill 1220 was passed into law in May 21 to address transitional and permanent supportive housing, as well as indoor emergency shelters and indoor emergency housing. This state law does preempt local zoning authority. And so there's two things to consider there. And that is one, the cities are required to allow transitional housing and permanent supportive housing in all zones where hotels or residential dwelling units are allowed. And then effective September 30th this month, the city cannot prohibit indoor emergency shelters or indoor or emergency housing in any zones in which hotels are allowed, except when permitted in a majority of zones within a 1 mile proximity of transit. We had our public hearing and first reading on September 2nd, and public hearing was closed with no public testimony. Next slide. So we had a few questions at our last meeting, and we wanted to provide some answers to that. First was, where can we see how crime prevention through environmental design principles, or CEPTED, can be or is implemented? We do have an example from the Marina District Design Guidelines, which is available on our website, where these principles were applied. Due to the fact that these can vary depending on the site, we felt that it was best to provide an example of how this was applied in our area. Another question was, what is the area median income? And so we pulled that from the 2019 American Community Survey. I believe we're a few days shy before other information can be available, but that came out to 70,222. And I can't imagine that changing too much since the last year. And then lastly was a request about an operational plan. To be exact, we did not find any examples where they have considered the requirements or implications of House Bill 1220. We do know of others that exist, but without the consideration of the new bill, in state law, it's hesitant to provide any examples as they may not consider those requirements. And then lastly is a suggested motion. I move to adopt the draft ordinance number 21-035, amending chapters 18.01, 18.52, 18.210 of the DMMC, and adding and codifying a new chapter entitled Supportive Housing Standards to the Des Moines Municipal Code. And that's it for our presentation.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion? Councilmember Buxton.
I move to adopt draft ordinance number 21-035, amending chapters 18.01, 18.52, and 18.210 Des Moines Municipal Code, and adding and codifying a new chapter entitled Supportive Housing Standards to the Des Moines Municipal Code.
Okay. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Mahoney. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize. I have several questions. First of all, is there an option to move this to a third reading?
I don't believe so, but I would yield to our city attorney.
I mean, the council could always push this off to another meeting.
Okay.
One consideration that this statute goes into effect at the end of September.
Understood.
Timeline.
Has the city, do we have a timetable, any kind of expectation of interest from developers? I mean, I know you can't, be specific, but is there an expectation that this is coming immediately?
I can jump in there on that one. We haven't really had any developers contacting the city related to this particular, these would generally be nonprofit organizations that would be developing the type of housing that this regulates.
Okay. I'm trying to, I don't want to take up too much time, but that property, it's on 16th, a little bit north of 272nd. And I believe it's a private home that was purposed for like addiction recovery and so forth. Are we familiar with that? It's like a greenhouse. I'm looking for examples of how this might impact any kind of group homes or I'm sorry if I'm being vague here, but when I read through it and you've got this limitation of 1,000 feet, and I look at all of the churches that I know that have provided temporary help, and does that take them off the table from, any existing kind of help that people are providing?
So what I would state is that the definition and specifics to the 1,000 feet distance are location supportive housing facilities, i.e. Indoor emergency shelters, indoor emergency housing, permanent support. So those specific housing types, it would not include the general adult family home that may exist out there, as those don't necessarily meet the same requirements as those definitions. So I would hesitate, as sometimes there can be non-permitted situations out there that maybe I'm not aware of, but as it stands right now, the way that it is defined is that it would be 1,000 feet from those sites as we've defined them, which is the indoor shelters and emergency housing, permanent supportive housing, and transitional.
Mayor, if I may, I do not believe it's appropriate to speculate on specific properties that could impact the potential value of those properties. So I think speaking in generalities about locations in the city is fine, but I think honing it in on specific parcels does not do service to the council or to the property owner.
Okay, I agree. I'm just trying to, first of all, just sort of get a sense that it doesn't preclude any existing help that churches or other group homes might be providing. It says something about a good neighbor policy. Are there any examples of that in place? What that would entail.
I'm sorry, the good neighbor policy, I'm having a difficult time referencing where that is pulled from.
Oh, okay. Never mind. It says in the draft ordinance, it says to establish a good neighbor policy as part of policing, and I'm so sorry.
If it's referencing perhaps it could be referencing CFTEP or CFTED, the crime prevention through environmental designs, that can definitely be components or tools that are utilized to ensure the good neighbor aesthetics and policies that might exist out there.
Excuse me, when there was discussion about establishing a facility that became clearly unwanted by the neighborhood, there was discussion at that time before they withdrew their application to establish a good neighbor policy, which would incorporate all the concerns of the neighborhood and agreements with the provider that they would not violate those. So I don't know that we've put any of those in place, but that was the intent at the time. There was something similar, or I won't even say similar, that's not a fair characterization. But when there was an issue that concerned neighborhoods, that was potentially a remedy, and that may be potentially a remedy moving forward.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of what accountability there will be for the landlord if there are any concerns from the community. How that process would, if there's anything special.
I would say that the purpose of designing or writing our chapter to include an operational plan was left purposely vague to include that degree of flexibility within our plans and approval process to ensure that we can consider those types of items, whether it's managerial proceedings, intake processes, things like that.
Okay, one last thing, and just 30 seconds rhetorical. My wife was beaten up by her boyfriend before we got married. And so the first thing that happened when we moved to wonderful Burien was she tried to establish a temporary women's shelter, okay, to give women 30 days to find their feet. And 26 years ago, you would be surprised at how unwoke the city was. My pastor from my church testified against having such a 30-day facility because he was concerned that it might be unhealthy for 152nd Street. Nobody cares about their property values more than I and so on. But I also want to make sure that this is not something that precludes providing help to people in need. Thank you.
See a hand from Councilmember Martinelli.
I'd like to put forth an amendment. I don't know if now is the appropriate time.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I would like to amend new section 8C to reduce the barrier from 1,000 feet to 500 feet.
Is there a second? I see a hand, but I can't hear what you're saying.
I would suggest 600 only because I believe that's what a previous ordinance had. But,
I would be fine with 600.
But it's something to consider. I'm just concerned that if you're basically because we don't have a map, you're basically really boxing in the possibilities to a very narrow range of possibilities. And I'm just putting it out there. Where can you put the, you know?
Are you, Councilmember Harris, are you seconding the motion?
I do. Thank you.
So we have a motion to change the distance from 1,000 feet to 600 feet. And we have a second. Any discussion? Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Really a question to Eric, probably. I thought that you guys had looked at, and maybe it's the city attorney, Tim George, but you guys had looked at comparable legislation or ordinances in other cities. And I think the standard was 1,000 feet. Am I not mistaken? Wasn't that why that recommendation was made?
So we pulled from both local neighboring cities that have enacted similar distances, but as well as considered our homeless encampment requirement or distance requirement, which is as well as 1,000. So it's more of just kind of considering the consistency that we might be able to get across.
Yeah, that was my next question. It sounds like you went for consistency throughout the town, keep it simple and not complicated. Okay, thank you.
So from my opinion, I think it is appropriate to remain consistent. It causes problems when you don't align your code well. So I would not be in favor of this. Councilmember Harris, you have your second time.
Oh, so it would be possible to vary this distance by some sort of geography or zone. In other words, could we say that it's 600 feet in certain parts of the city or 1,000 in others?
The difficulty with administering overlapping or kind of tandem distances is the issue that you would have as far as understanding where it's allowed and where it's not allowed. And so just the degree of citing in the just initial conversation that we would have with the developer about, you know, where can I place it, would generally require a significant amount of overlaying and map work to determine where that might be, especially when you're considering parking requirements that might be combined with some of those items.
So let me a little bit add to that. Thank you, Eric. You know, we'd have to have a basis, and so we would need to do some further research and see, you know, what were the characteristics of the areas in the zones that would warrant a different type of distance.
I'm you know, I've been sitting here for a while now looking at the zoning map and looking at the parcel viewer, and I'm really struggling to find places that you could actually cite the thing, you know, the three options in the ordinance, given that 1,000 feet and the schools and so on. It's really going to be onerous. And so, okay,
right.
That's it.
I see Council Martinelli for your second shot.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, yeah, I pretty much agree with Councilmember Harris. When you look at the map and you look at the 1,000 feet, I really do think that we're boxing these places in, and we're extremely limiting the locations that they can be. And I think that this is a need in our community. So I think that putting such a you know, a strong limit on it, I would just like to see that lowered in order to allow us more flexibility and having more of these locations within the city. And that's the reason why I support it.
Okay, I see we have, at this point, we have concluded the discussion on this matter. So all those in favor of reducing the 1,000 feet to 600 feet, please raise your hand until I call your name. I see Councilmember Martinelli and Councilmember Harris. All those opposed, please raise your hand until I call your name. I see Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, and Councilmember Nutting. Fails 2-5. This takes us back to the original motion to adopt the draft ordinance number 21-035, amending chapters 1801, 1852, and 1821 of the Des Moines Municipal Code, and adding codifying a new chapter entitled Supportive Housing Standards to the Des Moines Municipal Code. We have completed our discussion on this. So all those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. I have Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, Councilmember Nutting. Opposed? I see Councilmember Martinelli and Councilmember Harris. Okay, passes 5-2. This takes us on to our second old business item, which is the American Rescue Plan Act. And we have a staff presentation by City Manager Matthias.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to go through this. And one thing I want to tell you, there were multiple versions coming from different council members, and there's no problem with that. The problem came in correlating all of the different pieces into a coherent document. So what we've done is we're going to do a PowerPoint of essentially what's in your binder, and hopefully everything is included. We had somewhat of a mix up at the beginning of the week, but I think we addressed that. But we just wanted to walk through this. So we had discussed this briefly at the budget retreat, I believe, and moving through it. Table of contents. The first thing I'm going to talk about are the revenues specifically, how that works. And then secondly, we'll walk through expenditures, which include the recommendations from the administration, specific requests from council, and then requests from the community as a whole. And I thought, I think what we had asked the mayor was if, that what we do is after we present the administration recommendations, the council vote on those almost like a consent agenda item and pull anything that you're concerned about. We'll try and answer. And then we could move on to council requests. Those would be taken individually, and the community requests individually as well. So the first 2 pages, and this was not designed to be a PowerPoint, but we wanted to have all the information in a specific place accessible to the council and the public. So essentially, the way the process worked with revenue is that the cities were divided up based on population, and some of the larger cities deal directly with the federal government for their allocation, and smaller cities like Des Moines there's an extra layer where we deal with the state. And the revenue structure, we qualified for something like $9,040,000 total. We have received one payment for half of that, and we will receive the second payment. I believe that will be this year or possibly early next year for the other $4.5 million. There's two justifications that one can utilize for the money. And the first is how much lost revenue was experienced by the city and city programs in 2019. And then, and I'm sorry if I'm messing this up, but at any rate, it's revenue lost to the city, $4,800,000 for fiscal year into 12/31/2020. So that was 2020. We'll also look at 2021. So there's one category called lost revenue. That's revenue that was not generated to finance programs. And so we identify as we go through these recommendations, whether it's reflective of lost revenue or does it fit with the criteria of specific programs identified in the law. And so it's either lost revenue or it's relative to a specific function. So you'll see that as we go through it. But we qualify for the entire amount and we'll receive that entire amount. Beth Ann and Jeff Friend, our Assistant Director of Finance, have done a great job of tracking where we are and of justifying where we are and of acquiring those resources from the government, the state government and federal government. So with that, we can can move on. These are our recommendations. First, we'll show you a spreadsheet and then we'll walk through each of these. We have a brief narrative. The expenditures must be committed by 12/31/2024. And they could fund programs going out all the way to 2026, but the money has to be committed by the end of 2024. So as you'll see, I think the main things, and we can walk through these, one of the things that we did was recently added $66,000 in 2 years, over 2 years' time, to the money that we had identified was needed by our parks program to make them whole. Because as we described to council previously, what we did was we retained staff so we could implement programs when it became available. And there was a period last June when COVID looked like it was coming under control, and we were anticipating providing a full array of services and programs. But what happened then was the Delta variant occurred. COVID cases started increasing. The governor had increased kind of vigilance relative to COVID. And so what we've done without generating revenue is retained our staff for the public benefit when and if they can provide programs. And we had, the total was somewhere around $934,000. And what we did was we added an additional $66,000 for an FTE for the 2 years, 22-23, almost like a pilot. We'll see how it works. But in order to have staffing available at Underwood Park and other parks during the day, so people and moms and kids can go up there and we can open up the parks, we can assure that the hygiene in the restrooms is appropriate, that the parks are safe. And that would be both Beach Park and Underwood and anywhere else. But that we rounded it off to a request for $1 million for parks, which includes that FTE. And additionally, we're asking for $100,000 to, as part of the cost of replacing the Fieldhouse play equipment project. And in talking with one council member, we had hoped to have some type of rendering as to what that might look like, but we haven't gone far enough in the process yet to design the play equipment, how it would be laid out. So those are the parks requests. Bonnie, I think we could just go to the next narrative. Yeah. So these are narrative summaries of what I'm describing, and I'll just walk through these relatively quickly. The second thing that we've looked at is a new paradigm for social services integration with law enforcement to enhance accountability and response to the community. And this is something that we've worked very closely with Representative Orwell. She's supportive of this in the legislature, applauds what we're doing relative to being out in front and almost looking at this as a pilot program. But what we're recommending is there be 2 new police officer positions, 2 new social service contracted positions. We can then continue lease of space at Redondo, finance the body cams and program consultants. And then the structural costs of that would go on into 2025. And that would be for retention of records from the body cams. We're recommending use of the money for an evidence van, and then vehicles for new police officers and social service contract positions of $300,000. And what this would allow us to do is almost start to triage calls for service where a social worker, mental health worker, whoever it needs to be, could attend the call, could respond to the call with officers when there's any level of potential violence, but also for the social workers and that triage unit to establish what services are needed and what the disposition of the situation would be. So that would, help relieve our officers to do other things that are more like what the chief was talking about today when they busted the 2 grow houses. So that was, those are the costs associated with that. We're also looking at healthcare support for residents. We already do that through one of the grants at the senior center, and we'd like to expand access for decentralized service for residents that are not able to afford healthcare. And that would also help triage when they could be, treated on site, taken to urgent care, or ultimately taken to emergency. But the way it works now is that people without care that need care go to emergency. And that, ratchets up the cost for healthcare provision. And also the rest of us through our premiums finance those calls. And so this is a way that we could help to address medical issues as close to the source as possible. We're recommending to enhance the Human Services Committee budget to a targeted 1% general fund expenditures. If we had 75,000, we'll be at 250,000 in 2022, and or that will be 1% as identified in our ordinance of our expenditures. We're recommending to provide tenant eviction resources of $150,000. One of our council members has recommended that that number be increased, and we'll get to that when we talk about council requests. We want to support emergency transitional housing as we described in discussing the issue that Eric was bringing up. We would like to work with a nonprofit or the union hall or whoever to provide emergency transitional housing, and for the city to help provide the comprehensive services that go with that relative to, could be learning employment skills, it could be drug addiction remedies, it could be healthcare, it could be childcare, whatever it is, that the city participate to help assure the success of transitional housing. In support of economic development, we're recommending a grants program of $436,000. And that also would be associated with a regional partnership for small business of $64,000. That would be for 2 years. And the purpose of the regional partnership is for there not to be multiple redundancies in the efforts to support small business, but that some larger players like the Seattle Chamber of Commerce and the Port of Seattle, and I know that the city of Redmond has been involved with this, and there's some other federal monies that could support this. And we said we were interested in doing this subject to assurances that that $64,000 comes back into our community. We're not interested in supporting these efforts elsewhere. We're recommending to maintain and expand the EATS program to $10,000 a month, $2,500 a week to different restaurants to maintain that service, and also to review food truck zoning. There was a comment today in public comment about food trucks, and we'd like to get it right for the city relative to where food trucks can locate, what requirements they would face, what their timeframes would be, and how we can also have a resource of a food truck in the city, which is great for workers on short lunch breaks, whatever it is, to support that. But we'd like to do a formal review of it relative to zoning and placements, and then bring that to council and have your approval on what we recommend. We're also suggesting improvements to the marina, investment in marina infrastructure of $1.75 million. A contribution to SR3, the Marine Mammal Rescue, of $75,000 based on the unique interface that they have with the sound, and also to support the tenant restroom project, and which would relieve some of the money to go elsewhere in the marina. We hear the concerns of people that their views will be blocked or whatever their concern is, and we think we can address all of those. But we also see, for example, SR3 as a permanent resident at the marina, but not in the location where they are now, but in a future building facing west toward the water that would mitigate any impacts of noise or activity there. Also, you'll see under the council request, there's a recommendation to establish a nonprofit foundation to address other nonprofits in the city. let's go on, Bonnie. You can. We're recommending Marina Beach people movers, which are essentially the shuttle buses. We'd like to find electrified ones. The ones we have are old, they're not functional, they break down. And this would assure that we could provide transport from the south parking lot to the north parking lot for farmers market days, that we could provide access to the beach park for events for people who needed to park in that north parking lot. And these have a lot of use, and the ones we have are old. So we're recommending we spend some money and get new ones. Transportation, we'd like to extend the community shuttle contract with Metro. That would be $125,000 a year for us. Metro puts in $125,000. That's a joint partnership. And we hope that when this contract ends, it will lead to fixed route service for that shuttle from the Angle Lake Station to the downtown. Additional traffic calming, $100,000 for the permanent radar feedback signs that are very popular. And we'd like to expand our ability to provide those. And also, we're recommending ADA compliance program, looking at trip hazard removals, panel replacements, ramp upgrades, all ways we can support access for ADA. The municipal court, we're recommending $550,000 for that. That is lost revenue for the court. That came from the lack of fines, tickets, whatever, but they did not bring in that revenue. And yet they're functioning literally with a virtual court, which doesn't take less staff, but changes the dynamic of the justice provision. So they lost significant revenue from COVID. And so we feel that this is, fair request from them in order to move forward with the staffing and services they currently provide or enhance what they provide. SCORE is also, we're recommending $250,000 over time to support SCORE. All the other member cities will be asked to do the same. SCORE has not been able to generate the revenue that it's needed to be fully functional. And as it's located in Des Moines and we are a member partner, we're recommending that we participate in the maintenance of a sustainable jail in the city. And then there's several additional items. We're looking at purchasing cooling misters that can be placed at different locations in the city in extreme heat. So that could be like a source of relief for people experiencing heat waves. There's budget publishing software to enhance easy access to the city budget documents. That would be $35,000. These are all one-time expenditures. Emergency management comprehensive plan. We need to do this to comply with state of Washington standards. So we would hire a consultant to update our plan for an ongoing requirement for a requirement of $8,000. That's a one-time expenditure to bring the emergency management plan into compliance. And finally, we're recommending human resource recruitment and engagement videos to help us in our recruitment of staff, which is now extremely competitive and difficult to acquire. So we thought this would be an innovative way to kind of share the story of the city. And all of these recommendations total $7,980,400, leaving well over $1 million for any considerations the council wants to make. And if you have specific questions about these items, this is the time. Thank you.
I apologize. I was muted. I see Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. So I will start with Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say that I'm in favor of increasing the Parks and Rec budget to $1 million from the 930. I don't have it in front of me, 935 or whatever, to help open up the Stephen J. Underwood Park, so we can have a great playground, some coverage, and being able to have that being used. I think that just is a no-brainer to me.
Okay, so are you making the motion that we increase that to $1 million from 934,000?
I make that motion, yes.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay. As a point, I turn to our city attorney, Tim George. Would this be the time that we made those adjustments, or should I entertain the motion of the entire entity first?
You know, Mayor, it's really your call. We don't really have a process. This, kind of expansive expenditure.
Okay.
So if you want to, you can do it either way you feel is appropriate.
Okay, well, because we've got a motion and a second, so I've got Councilor Nutting, and I believe the second came from Deputy Mayor Mahoney. And I see on this particular, we're talking on this particular issue. We have Councilmember Buxton and Councilmember Martinelli and Councilmember Banks. Thank you. We start with Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. So during the presentation by the city manager, I don't have a totally updated spreadsheet. So I have the spreadsheet in front of me as a worksheet that was in the packet. That spreadsheet says 934,000. So that's the amount that the city manager spoke of, correct? 934. So during the presentation, Michael, you spoke about that amount included some of these services that you were talking about, like at Stephen J. or the beach park. So are you saying that the 934 already covers a little bit of expanded service down at the beach park and Stephen J., like the restrooms?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I think what
Okay.
Councilmember Nutting identified is correct. So what we're saying is, let's add 66 to the 934, bring it to $1 million, and that 66 would represent an FTE for the purpose of providing security and monitoring and all the aspects that we'd want to open those parks up during the daytime. So we're rounding it to $1 million.
Okay, and so then I must have missed something along the way. So that should bring the bottom line to 8.6, correct? But it doesn't.
Well, the way, no.
8.064.
Because the spreadsheet that I put up includes that. And the way it works is there's $434,000 in 2 years. And there's 66,000 in 2 years. So that adds up to $1 million. And that's reflected in the 7.9 total that we had.
So, and this maybe is complicated. Where did you get the rest of the money? Where was the augmentation in the other places in the spreadsheet? Is it all over, or did you take that from one particular line item?
We didn't take it from anywhere. We have 9.404 million to work with. And what was reflected in our recommendations, including that million total, 7.980,400.
So can I try to answer your question, Tracy?
Yes, sure.
So the line item was 934. We had 434 in I think 2021 and 500,000 in 2022.
Correct.
So those got moved. He reduced the 500,000 to 434. So we have 434 and 434 for 2 years. And below that, he put 66 and 66. So he just increased that line item by 66,000 to $1 million, but he allocated that second year. He reduced the 500,000 by 66 to have that position for 2 years. Is that more confusing?
Well, it still says the amount is 934 with a bottom line of 8.014. And I'm just wondering.
But you're looking at, but Tracy, I think you're looking at what was in the binder, right?
That's correct. And
So what I said was that we made some changes. It was difficult to keep it consistent. So that's why we did the PowerPoint. So Bonnie, could you put up the PowerPoint slide for that Excel spreadsheet, please?
You know what, that's okay, Michael. I was, my question was basically, did you take a big chunk from an obvious place? If it's all over, then no, don't worry about it.
Well, I think that shows what Beth Ann is talking about.
Okay, all right.
That totals $1 million. So it's
All
a
right.
$66,000 increase. And then we reallocated a little within the $1 million to make sure that FT is covered for at least 2 years.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get back to where I can see everybody?
Sure.
Okay, the next person is Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little confused at what exactly the motion is. Under the recommendations that we just saw, the city manager is already recommending 1 million. So if the motion is to increase it to 1 million, are we just motioning to pass that line item, or are we motioning to increase it past the 1 million that the city manager is recommending, or is it just a motion to essentially concur with the city manager's changes?
Okay, I'm looking to Beth Ann, but from what I'm seeing, again, the reference point I have is a total amount of $934,000, and it was adding the 66,000 back in to make it an even $1 million over, which would be $500,000 in 2021 and 500,000 in 2022. I don't know if I'm correct. I would, and I'm leaving the finance balance to our finance director and staff. Councilmember Harris, I see your hand, but I'm not calling on you at this moment. I'm trying to...
Basically what Michael said is that we had 934 in the original document that we sent out to you, and we're increasing that line item up to 1 million. So, and that's what I understood Councilmember Nutting's motion is to, I basically affirm that number for 1 million for Parks and Rec.
Okay. Councilmember Martinelli, you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, so essentially, wouldn't the motion be to just pass that line item, not to increase the amount, given it is already to 1 million? And maybe that's a question for city attorney, maybe it's just kind of semantics, but it seems like the item is already being recommended at 1 million. So the motion would be to pass that item, not necessarily increase it, since that is already what the amount is being recommended.
Well, I think we have a shared understanding now. It was a little bit difficult because the first packet said 934, but now we're at 1 million. So I think Beth Ann kind of summarized it, that this would be to affirm that change from the packet to where we're at. So the wording probably is kind of semantics, but I think the understanding be fairly common for all of the council members at this point.
So the line item at this time is at $1 million as published. Correct? And presented. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Councilmember Nutting, your motion is to make sure that it stays at $1 million with the $66,000 positions included. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if if I am correct, then there is no need for this motion. Is that correct, Beth Ann?
I think I would confirm with the city attorney. I think the struggle is that what people have in their packets is different than what's being presented. So from that point.
Yeah. So I guess just to clarify, I think Councilmember Martinelli is correct as well. Councilmember Nutting made a motion essentially to up the original recommendation from 934 to $1 million. And I believe if the council were to vote yes, essentially that locks that in, and then we can move on to the next issue.
And I believe that, okay. So I had other hands that went up before Councilmember Harris says, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Councilmember Bangs.
I guess I know it's this issue. I don't disagree, but I'm looking at what's in our packet. And then I looked at what you had on the slide. And for some reason, your slide said 7,980,400. How did it get reduced? If what you're saying in our packet shows the 934, 434, and 500, but our bottom line says 8,014,400. I'm confused.
I would not. So, council member, one of the things that happened is, we'd asked for sort of the 7th of September to be the close date on input, and we received input as recently as yesterday. So I would just use what we're presenting to you in the PowerPoint as the document.
And you should keep it on the screen because I'm confused.
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
so just to be clear with everybody, that when it's on the screen, I will be turning to the city clerk to see the hands. No, that's fine. I mean, it's better that the information is clear. But when your hand goes up, I will be turning to the city clerk, and then I will be ordering based on the information I received from her. So the question right now is, Councilmember Bangs, have you got your answer?
Councilmember, I can add one thing that may help.
All right.
And originally, after a discussion with Councilmember Mahoney and Councilmember Buxton, we had added into the recommendations, the staff recommendations, $100,000 for nonprofit. And then realizing that that was their recommendation, we took that out. So that lowered the amount by 100,000, and we added that to the council member request that you'll see in a minute.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna walk with you through this. Okay. Just what's on this PowerPoint. I won't even look at what's in my packet.
Yeah.
Because it is confusing. So
I'm sorry.
It's all right. Let's go.
Okay. Now I see Councilmember Harris.
Let's see if, okay, thank you, Mayor. So my question is, what was the 934 originally? What does that represent before the adding in the 66?
That was the estimate of lost revenue by the Parks Department as a result of COVID.
Okay, then, and then may I point out for my colleagues that, so this 66 is to add something new, a new FTE, correct?
Correct.
Okay, then I would suggest that it is not revenue loss and therefore is categorized inappropriately. And I don't think that's semantics. I am all in favor of, the purpose, but I would put it in another box, not as revenue loss.
Well, okay. I appreciate your input. That represents, it's possible that if we'd had the revenue, we would have created this position.
Okay, Sure.
Okay, at this time, just for point of clarification, that line item is at $1 million. I want to make sure that we've addressed this appropriately. So with that line item being
Wait,
there,
yeah,
and
I got one other thing. Sorry,
Okay.
but and this is for the city attorney, and I'm sorry if this is pedantic, but is there any legal issue in the fact that I'm looking at the PDF that is on the city website right now, and it differs from the spreadsheet? Is there any issue with the fact that what we are discussing differs materially from the public document announcing the meeting?
It's not a legal issue.
Okay, thank you.
okay, this will be updated tomorrow per our City Clerk and Communications Director. So I guess where I'm at right now is I want to go back to Councilmember Nutting to say, because it looks like, I understand the nature of your motion, it looks like that money's already there. Are you content to withdraw that motion? Or do you want us to vote on the motion so it just stays as a light item and confirms it so we can move ahead?
I guess that's why I had my hand raised a second ago, is a point of order. We should probably know how we're going to move through this, right? Are we going to vote on this document the way it is? Or are we going to take sections out of this document and vote on them as they're changed? And are we going to vote on every single council member's suggestion to change this document?
Well, what I would personally recommend is that the staff has made their recommendations and we've all had time to review them. I realize there are some fine tunings with the numbers, but as presented, we have a block in front of us. My recommendation would be that we vote on that, and that still leaves us over $1 million for the items that have been submitted for discussion, because we will have to, from as far as the council items go, we will have to talk about those. But as far as this goes, I think this, in my opinion, I think the staff has done an excellent job breaking things down, putting them into a document. Granted, there were some fine tunings done, but they have been explained and noted in the current presentation. So I would ask simply at this point, is there a motion?
So then, Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but then I will change my motion from the $1 million for the Parks Department, in agreement with you that staff has done a great job of putting this together and allocating funds, that I will change my motion from the $1 million for the Parks Department to motioning to pass this document as displayed on our screen.
And presented by staff.
And presented by staff.
Okay, so I see Louisa Bangs. And
Yeah, sorry.
Louisa, and then I see Councilmember Harris. So Louisa Bangs, Councilmember Bangs.
I don't disagree with how we should move forward. And I've had some discussion on what was in my packet, where I'm looking at some things that I really feel I need a little more context or answers for before I can even, unless this is part of the discussion period, which I can certainly wait.
This would be, if I get a second on this motion, then we go into discussion.
All right, I can wait.
And okay, the next hand up was Councilmember Harris and then Councilmember Buxton. But is there a second to Councilmember Nutting's motion? I'll tell you what, I'll solve it. I'll second Councilmember Nutting's motion. Okay, so now we're moving into discussion. All those who wish to make a comment, please raise your hand so I can get my notes right. So Harris, Banks, Buxton, Honey. Martinelli. Okay, we'll start with Councilmember Bangs. Then I'll go to Councilmember Harris, Buxton, Mahoney, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and Martin and Councilmember Martinelli. So Councilmember Bangs, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I would say for the police department, I have absolutely no problem at all with the new officers, none at all. And then what's required for them to be able to be successful. However, I have to have some better understanding of police cam and program consultant. Because my feeling is we could do that internally. Could be wrong, but I believe we have some very sharp detectives and sergeants and chief, assistant chief. That's a chunk of money there. And I'm feeling that if there's a way to accommodate council and community requests, because I believe everybody's requests make perfect sense. Perfect sense. There's probably not a lot of them I would go against. There are some I would shave down. But looking at some of where this money could come from, I'm saying, please help me with the 250, the 80. I mean, the total would be 250. And then, or am I looking at that right? Hold on. Yes, 250,000. And again, also a question on the evidence van. Could you please help me? Because I'm really trying to understand the true need of that. I know it's a great want for some of them, but help me, because that would be the only two areas in this part of the budget that I'm having a rather tough time with, especially if we can shave money somewhere.
Yeah, Chief, do you want to take a shot at this, or I will?
Michael, I'm sorry, City Manager Matthias, why don't you go ahead and start? The chief will respond momentarily.
Okay. Councilmember Banks, the idea is that we're dealing with a large sum of money that is within the context of the federal guidelines. There's a huge amount of discretion as to how this money is used. And so we could pay for the body cams, and that 250 could come out of the general fund for police services. The same with the evidence van. This seemed like a way to make some purchases for police that didn't, disrupt the general fund. And I'm not saying that if we transfer them to the general fund and don't do them here, that's completely the discretion of council, how you want to do it. And I don't know, Chief, if you have anything to add to that.
Yes, if I can. I can tell you times have changed, and we are getting called out for violent crimes and more complex type crimes. We need an evidence. We just hired today, brought on an evidence technician, retired police sergeant that was a detective sergeant, who will now be responding to calls when there's a shooting or a homicide, or this truly is going to make us a much more effective. We've changed the way we're doing business to be working smarter and more effective. And so the evidence van really is a way to transport evidence, to go to scenes and effectively process the evidence. So that is entails the evidence van. And I can tell you the body cams, although I appreciate your confidence, I can tell you in our existing staff, I can tell you it's very complex. The technology that goes with body cameras, with redaction, with storage, with all of the aspects of body cameras, which really is becoming a norm for law enforcement. So those are the reasons why money in those areas is critically important, that we do it right.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Bangs, I mean, the other part of it, I know that you're not asking the justification for those. You're just asking what the source of the money is going to be.
Right.
And so for us, one of the highest priorities, because the way that council ultimately decides to spend this money is going to impact the budget that we present to you in early October. And so what we're trying to do is, to the greatest degree possible, we're fine with this, but we want to maintain that strength, is to make sure our fund balance in the general fund is sufficient for whatever comes next. And since no one knows what's coming next, we want to be safe. So that's the reason we would recommend apply these through ARPA. We can fund them through the general fund if that's council's desire.
So one more clarifying question for you or the chief. You have body cams and program consultant on the same line. What?
Yeah. Yes.
What is what? What of that $250,000 is for body cams and what is for the program consultant? And is the program consultant the one that's going to be working on the body cam documentation? What's the consultant for?
I'll leave that to the chief.
Well, the consultant is working with us. He's working with the camera vendor. He's coordinating conversations with officers to make sure we get the right specifications. He's doing stuff that is a way higher level than what we are. He just facilitated signing the contract so we can get the proper equipment. We're looking at reaching out to various parts of the public on our policy issues and in following national policy recommendations. It's going to need some technology because I can tell you it's not set up to push the button when you leave the station in the morning and turn it off when you get back. So there's some technology, Bluetooth technology, like if your gun comes out of your holster or if certain things happen, it triggers the camera to turn on if they weren't already on. So it's very complex technological stuff that's what our consultant is helping us to work through.
And that consultant is going to train someone, I would imagine.
Well, yes, he will be working with our staff because we'll have to sustain it. He won't be here for forever, but we're going to try to keep him as long as we can until we can get our program up and running and as effective as possible.
I think if you get a her, you'll probably have a lot more detail. Just so you know. Yeah, okay, I appreciate that. It's a little clear, when you have all of this jumbled on one line, and I know it's tough to put it in more detail. I appreciate your explanation. I would still be a proponent of moving the evidence van out for a little more money elsewhere, but that this is up to council. So thank you.
Hey, Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a motion that we pass as one slate all items marked as revenue loss or COVID response, which by my old adding machine is $2.77 million, and reschedule discussion for the remainder until February of 2022. Yeah. Do I have a second?
I'll provide a second to allow discussion on this.
Thank you.
Okay, motion was made and seconded. We are now into discussion, which is the motion was to pass. I'm sorry, what did you say? Revenue loss?
Revenue loss and COVID response, all the items in those two categories.
Response. And delay everything till February?
You bet.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Harris, and we have a second by Martinelli. We are now open for discussion. I need some help with hands. So
Well-
we have, hang on,
Okay.
we have what? Okay, the only hand so far is Councilmember Buxton and Councilmember Harris, Deputy Mayor Mahoney. Okay, and I will enter myself into that as well. Okay, Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. My knee-jerk response to this is I would be amenable to passing all of the recommended things tonight at the beginning here for the sake of time. But as far as putting all the rest off until February, I think part of the reasoning for that might be that the disbursement of all of these ARPA funds are going to be under the authority of a different council than is seated here. But this is part of our job. And I think every new council that gets seated after an election is always carrying out something, decisions or directives that have been put forth by a previous council. In fact, this council that's sitting here is continually acting on many directives that from councils even 5 or 7 years ago. So that is part of the responsibility of a sitting council, to always be working on directives from a previous decision. So I think that the sitting council here are good minds who are very favorable toward this community and want to see all of these important things move forward. Another benefit of moving forward right now under this sitting council is that we have been collecting opinions and been a little bit saturated in information and feedback from the community. And I believe that we're in a good place right now in our minds and hearts. We've been thinking about this information quite a bit. So I have faith in this sitting council to make good decisions with the information and input that we have. So I don't really see a big benefit of putting it off until next year. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris, you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Mayor. I hadn't even thought about the next council thing. Basically, if somebody wanted to amend this to make it a special meeting at the end of this year, that would be fine. I just happen to think that, so I'm looking at 3 different numbers, grand totals, all right? And this is just chaos to me. It was 640 when we finished discussing Councilmember Nutting's motion. That's one line item of the recommended plan. All right, this is just it's just chaos and we've received multiple versions of the packet. There is no way we can do justice to these expenditures in this short time frame. This meeting demonstrates that it just can't be done equitably. It's an arbitrary. It's arbitrary. It doesn't have to be done now. The genuine revenue loss, absolutely. Make sure that people get paid. The genuine COVID response, absolutely. Make sure that we respond to COVID. But the other stuff, let's just calm down, take a couple of weeks, months, whatever my colleagues think is good, and and just have a more organized thing. And I'll just say one other little deal, and then I'm done. So what tends to happen is that the city manager presents these bullet points and then expands on it in a narrative fashion at the meeting. That makes it very difficult for me to decide on anything. It would be better use of time, in my opinion, if he had written down all of that stuff that he said that I could review for 6 days and ponder okay, and the public as well, rather than waiting until the meeting where I have to decide on the fly based on new information. And I find that challenging. So for all those reasons, I think it's just better to just relax and, you know, hold this over. It doesn't have to be until after the election. It can be whenever people have the time, but let's make adequate time for this. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. I was under the understanding the whole purpose of this was to figure out a good tentative plan so that could be planned in conjunction with the budget that we approve in November. And I think that's important that we continue to do that work. I think we can get this roughly right knocked out. I was prepared for a long tenured meeting to get at least a preliminary plan and then move forward in February or later this year or something like that with some changes and so forth. We can always look at adjustments and so forth. But in particular, not only the revenue loss, but I'll talk about these economic development items. There's a lot of businesses that actually would definitely benefit and need some of these rewards. And if we're ready to go in 2022, instead of delaying it, that would be an injustice to them, along with the charities and other things some of us are proposing, et cetera. So I'm more like, let's get this done in a basic outline so they can plan their budget, put this in tandem, see the whole picture and work forward. Thank you.
Okay, and I have to say, well, you know, if you look at the line, there's 20, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. What I'm seeing here is a series of things that are in a program year of 2021, and there's a number of expenditures, both on economic development and so forth, and marina infrastructure. Well, that's not a good example, but there are a number of expenditures that would go out and are necessary to keep things moving and get things moving ahead. I think that we currently have this on as a block, and it's okay to ask for points of clarification, but we have a motion on the table to pass this as a block, as the staff has recommended. I don't think the staff has, I disagree. I think the staff has done an excellent job. I think as City Manager Matthias pointed out, people came in very last minute looking at additional change. Any change that I plan to propose will be out of the additional $1 million that the council has to discuss. But I think this is, I've been here a while, and I can say that I think this is very well thought, and I agree. There are a number of businesses and citizens that need some of these other categories, and there are a number of initiatives that are moving forward that need some of these categories. As City Manager Matthias also pointed out, this is tied to our budgeting cycle this year, and it will impact what comes forward. So I'm not in favor of the delay. And the next hand that was seen was Councilmember Bangs.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mayor. I would agree that we should go ahead and vote on this block now. I would also say to the city manager's credit that I believe the presentation he provided was extremely well thought out. It absolutely went through every single one of these items, even though the bottom line was different. And he as well as others that were asked questions explained those well. As far as chaos or chaotic, there's nothing chaotic about these numbers. They're tied to something. There was a description based on these in our packets where we had plenty of time to read them. And the only thing that was different or in addition to were the questions that were asked during this meeting. So I would be a proponent of passing this today.
Okay, Mr. Harris, Councilmember Harris, you have your second pass at this.
Let's see here. Mayor, would you be willing to suspend? Let me just get, this is my second time speaking, and then we're going to vote on this as a block. correct?
We're voting, we are discussing your motion.
Okay.
And
Okay, so my question, I guess, for the city attorney is, when can we start spending this $4.5 million? Okay, or $9 million. Can we start writing checks against that fund immediately, or when?
Tim, if you're okay, this is Beth Ann.
Oh, I'm sorry, terribly sorry.
That's okay. The funds could be start spending March 3rd, 2021. So yes, the money that we have received, we can start spending it. And then also just a point of order. I went and looked at the items that you said were revenue loss or COVID, and I came up with a different total.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't catch what your total was. I came up with 2,807,400.
Yeah, like I said, I've got an old adding machine and I was just doing it. Yeah, but
okay.
Yeah.
That was just a point of order. Okay.
Yeah, no,
thank you.
But no, thank you. So yeah, all right. So we can spend it fine. To me, it just seems like there is no, this is, I don't even know what to say. I would never as a business person approve this kind of expenditure with this lack of detail as a block. I just wouldn't. And I want to tell the public, I totally understand the need for all of this stuff. And, but man, you just can't write checks with this lack of detail. Thank you.
were there any other hands that came in? Okay, so that completes our discussion. The motion was to pass the revenue loss and COVID response and to delay all other finances until some time in the future. The motion was made by Councilmember Harris, seconded by Councilmember Martinelli. We've completed our discussion. So all those in favor of passing only those categories and delaying the rest until some point in the future, was mentioned February, raise your hand. I can't see them, so can we take the spreadsheet down? Can we take the spreadsheet down so I can see? So all those in, okay, so in favor, I see Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Martinelli. Opposed? I see Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, and Councilmember Nutting. The motion fails 2-5. So now we are back to our original motion to pass this as a block. And we are on to Councilmember Buxton.
Because I have 3 questions, I'm tempted to make a motion for the sake of more discussion availability. I think with a motion, I only get 2 opportunities to speak to the motion, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion that we eliminate the $64,000 on line item under small business grants. And I'm purely doing that so that I can have more opportunity for questions as we move through this.
So the motion is to eliminate.
Is to eliminate the $64,000 under small business grant line item.
Okay, the motion was made by Councilmember Buxton. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Buxton, seconded by Councilmember Harris. Okay, and at this time we'll go into conversation. I see Councilmember Harris. I see Councilmember Buxton. And that's all I see at this time. Councilmember Harris, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I provided a second basically because I would like to, I don't know if we need a formal motion to suspend this only speak twice rule for the purposes of this discussion. It will become, it's just impossible to discuss each item in detail otherwise. And so, yeah, I have a question about SR3 and basically everything else, and I'm sure others do as well. So
that's a tertiary motion. Does he need a second?
do I need to make a motion for that? I move to suspend the rule. What is it, 9 something? I apologize. I don't have the rules of procedure in front of me, but yeah, I would like to extend.
I think we're getting a little off the rails here. We're discussing essentially a motion to amend the original motion. So let's get through that, and then we can talk about speaking to additional.
Yeah, we need to stay on the motion at hand, and right now it's to eliminate small business grants. So Councilmember Harris, do you have a comment on the small business grant elimination?
My comment on the small business grant is that it would be great to have more information about how that is, that regional partnership would be structured. And so I support removing that item because I didn't get any, I don't really understand what that $64,000 is for. So if somebody could tell me what, more that's about, that would be helpful.
And Mayor, can I just add one more point of order here? Because I want to speak to Councilmember Buxton's, the rationale for her motion. Council, under council rules, you can speak more than twice with the consent of the entire council. So I don't know if you want to withdraw that motion and just ask the council for consent if you would like to speak on a separate time. That could be one option. Rather than making motions on something that you don't really want to make a motion on.
Okay, I will go along with that. Thank you, Attorney George. So I will withdraw that motion, and when it gets time, I will ask for permission if I need it. Thank you. So in lieu of that, I have a question. In regard to a little bit more clarity about the regional partnership, I would be more comfortable if we're going to allocate $64,000 to supporting SBDC, Small Business Development Center at Highline, because they reach out to very hyper local. They're very local, and I did do some reading about the regional partnership through the chamber, and like the city manager did say, they were going to be have more specificity right here. So I guess I'd like a little more clarity on that because of their vision goals. When they talked about they meet the needs of the entire region, even up far north. So just an assurance that this $64,000, I'm fine with the $64,000. I just really want to be assured that it's going to go directly into the citizens of Des Moines and not even Kent or Normandy Park or Burien. This is ARPA funding for a Des Moines resident. So is there a way to be assured of that?
Councilmember Buxton, let me answer. I thought I was perfectly clear in my presentation. Apparently I wasn't.
Okay.
I said that this money would be expended for this purpose with the assurance that the $64,000 is spent on Des Moines local business.
Okay.
That
Great.
would be a condition. And if that condition wasn't met, we would not honor our obligation to pay the money.
Okay.
Councilor Buxton, you still have the floor.
All right. Well, I do have another question. May I ask that right now, or do I need to wait for another opportunity? Okay. So in regard to tenant eviction resources, will this be allocated to landlords or tenants? And secondarily, if it's allocated to landlords, is there a way to put parameters around it so that, for example, big corporations in the city don't aren't the sole recipients versus mom and pop landlords that have 1, 2, 4 rentals? Is there some way that we can help our mom and pop landlords while we're doing this?
Okay, council member, if I may. So
Yes.
first of all, in discussions that I had with a number of council members, council member Martinelli had suggested raising this, I think, to 250,000, if I recall, and that is in the council request. So we put down 150. There will be on the table a recommendation to raise that. So in terms of going and doing all the research on all these items before they're approved, we just don't have the staff or resources to do that. So what we had anticipated for this was working with the nonprofit who's already providing these services, contracting with them to provide those services in the city. Ideally, the parameters of what we provide, maybe there's a limit on the size of the apartments or whatever, but there's, if the tenants can't pay the rent and we pay the rent goes to the owner of the facility. Now, if we were to say, okay, it should be locally owned, no more than 10 units. Okay, so that means that people living in a 12-unit facility with 3 kids and no way to pay the rent, they're not covered in this. And that's a lot of the legality right now that's being discussed, even the congressional allocation. They're being sued in court to determine what the rules of the road are. And we don't know what the outcome of those lawsuits, but we would like to focus everything on Des Moines residents in need who this could help. Now, can that be structured legally, or how we do that? We need the expertise of a nonprofit, and there are nonprofits doing this, but we would engage with them and try and establish what the rules of the road look like to help our residents. I can't tell you the answer to that at this time, but this is an allocation of resources to help people who can't pay the rent as the federal support's running out. And that's the best that we know.
But point of order, Mayor, weren't we talking about a motion to remove $64,000 from the small business grants, or did we move on from that? Did you withdraw your motion?
That motion has been withdrawn.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and one of the things I think City Manager Matthias, a point he just made is this is a budget. So we have dollars to allocate. I hear a lot of people asking, I want specific details of who you're going to work with, how it's going to be done, or whatever. In a budget, you'll never find those specific details. The devil is always in the details. But if you listen to what City Manager Matthias said, it's to find organizations or to apply the dollars in their categories directly to projects or businesses or situations within the city of Des Moines for the benefit of the Des Moines community. And I hope the council can understand that. Councilmember Buxton, did you complete your questions?
Yes.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll ask a few questions and then I want to make a statement about the police portion of that. Really quick, on the small business grants program, do we have any estimate of what will the cost will be for an independent source to delegate those funds? Is there any ballpark at all? Just out of curiosity.
I could give you a ballpark. I talked with Eric about that today. Probably it could be anywhere in the neighborhood from 15 to 25% for administering those funds. I think personally, and Councilmember Martinelli, I think you were the first one back with the CARES program to mention this. I think it would be wise to have a third-party administration of this for a number of reasons. And Councilmember Buxton, we work so closely with Rich Shockley at the SPDC, and he was one of the panel that reviewed the original GROW program under the CARES Act. But yeah, so the trick is finding an organization who can do that work that we trust, who doesn't charge an arm and a leg. those are the criteria. But there are organizations that do that. We've discussed a few of them, and we would interview them and try to see how they could help us.
Yeah, I agree for the need. My concern is that could be up to $109,000 of that money, and 4 or 5 or maybe 6 businesses could benefit. But thank you. That's good to know. Moving down, the food truck portion, is our mind there more for the city-owned sites where those food trucks would be?
I think what we anticipate wanting to use that money for is doing a citywide look at it. So what would be the rules of the road in a residential setting? What commercial pieces would be available relative to city-owned property? How would, what would be available with that? We've done, sort of pods on the marina floor. That's where Quarterdeck uses one of those. We have food trucks and vendors who come down to the farmer's market. We have the Creole restaurant. And so there's the food truck kind of kitty corner to Marine View Espresso. But we just would like to establish what are the rules? How does it relate to the zoning? What recourse do food truck owners and the public have so that these don't become in any way bothersome, but they're positives for the community? And we just have been doing, like most cities, a piecemeal application by application, and we'd like to do a more comprehensive look at the entire zoning, present that to council, get your approval, and go from there.
Okay. Michael, the next question would be, can you remind the community and the council about how this $75,000 will benefit SR3?
Right. So, SR3 provides a unique opportunity in our city for stewardship and interaction with Puget Sound. And their sole purpose is to help sea life in the Sound, mostly mammals, marine mammals, survive, heal from wounds, heal from, the kind of challenges that marine mammals have. And we have emphasized in the marina redevelopment the need for environmental sustainability, stewardship with the Sound, of our relationship with the Sound, and actions we can take to enhance the quality of habitat for wildlife and salmon and other, aspects of marine life. And SR3 does that in a unique manner. And we feel that their presence is a positive for the city. They can help provide educational opportunities. They can work with the Maritime High School. There's just a lot of positives to having them successful and located at the marina. We would anticipate in the future, and I've talked with Casey about this, that we would recommend that they find a permanent home in an adaptive purpose building on the west side toward the water. And they could divide that up into access for tours and then the privacy they need to treat the mammals without public, observation. And that we would work with them to help design that and help them be successful in that presence. So I think those are some of the unique characteristics of SR3, which are different than most nonprofits are able to provide. So that's the basis for that recommendation.
Okay. Mayor, for a little brevity, I'll hold off for a second round until I make my comments on the police and let somebody else ask some questions.
Okay, I believe Councilmember Martinelli, you'd had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my question was in regards to the business grant program, but it's kind of already been addressed, so I'm okay for the moment.
Okay. Then I saw Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. So with regard to the food trucks, is that to hire an outside consultant to review processes, or is this allocating existing staff time? I'm curious as to.
Yeah, I think that the first thing we would do is look for the availability and quality of external resources. It's not an expertise that we have. There are people that do that. This is now a kind of a hugely growing field in economic development. And so we would look for an external resource. Hopefully we could locate.
Thank you. Next, can you describe the small business grant program, sort of the life cycle of a grant, how long, the application, basically how long it takes from the time that the business owner applies to them getting a check?
I cannot.
Okay, darn. Yeah, then for right now anyway, is there, can you provide any more detail on what the marina infrastructure money, how that would be allocated? Or is it just, to be determined at this point?
Councilmember Harris, we have been working the past however many years to identify improvements to the marina and redevelopment opportunities. And those rested largely on the renovation and the structural integrity of the north bulkhead, which we were, because of our prudent fiscal policies, because of the actions of this and primarily previous councils, we were able to come up with $12 million for that renovation, phases 1 and 2, within the resources of the city, including $4 million from the state, $3.1 million of bonds, and about $4.5 million of cash. Okay, so we're doing that, and that bulkhead is under renovation. And believe me, that was a major effort, and everyone who was on council previously remembers the efforts we went through to get the National Marine Fisheries Service permit as part of the Corps of Engineers permitting, and the efforts that, all the way from Andrew, who did a great job on our staff, up to Congressman Adam Smith helping us, and the mayor intervening, and Anthony Hempstead helping us, everyone, Dan, Brandon, myself, Susan. And so that took a chunk out of our capital budget. At the same time, we're looking at the critical component of success for the marina are the development of the marina steps. And at the same time, we're looking at trying to enhance water quality treatment on 223rd by doing bioswales and some redesign and turning that into an urban creek that would capture a huge portion of the runoff that comes from SeaTac Airport and enters our watershed, so we can enhance the quality of what's released into the sound. All of those are expensive projects, okay? And so we're working with ourselves and partners, and we put out the RFQ. So there would be hopefully some type of partnership, which council would have to sign off on or agree to. But that money for marina infrastructure helps to address the financial demands that I just identified relative to some very significant projects that are going to connect the marina to the downtown, enhance downtown economic development, enhance the kind of resources that exist on the marina. So that would be the purpose of that money.
Yeah, no, that all sounds great. I just wondered if, pick one or more of those. I just, is it going to basically pay back, cash from the bulkhead projects, or is it for the steps, or again, all of the above, or?
Well, I wish it was all of the above. I don't think it's enough for all of the above, but I will tell you that when we established an agreement with the developer to do the marina steps in the building to the north, depending on the terms of that agreement and the participation of the developer, that would help determine where this money would be spent.
Two other quick things. Regarding SCORE, should there be any concern that you're proposing to use this money for SCORE? Does that speak to it, anything having to do with its long-term viability or financial condition?
Yeah, council member, I seem to recall you always want me to bring out my crystal ball. So the idea is that the future, SCORE is, not unlike all agencies right now facing uncertainty. And the thing is that because of the way that they function and their role in the world, that uncertainty is a little bit heightened because, as you know, the rules of the road for police engagement have changed. And so maybe there are less people being booked. I don't know what the quantitative look on that is, but we think that currently SCORE is under great management. Devin has done a fantastic job over there, bringing them along, but they're still coming up short. And I think that at the moment we're treating that like an acute problem. And if that becomes a long-term problem, then we're going to have another discussion with council about what role we play in that.
Okay, and last but not least, with regard to healthcare support, does that entail grants to existing providers or anyone new that we have not, worked with before?
Yeah, I think once again, in reference to what the mayor said, those are details that we would work out, but we would anticipate contracting with healthcare providers to provide that service. We already do through one of the levies. We do something like that with the senior center, and we'd like to expand that. But we want to have healthcare, be it CHI, be it Health Point, be it CMAR, be it whoever. We want to work with people that do this for, that's what they do, in order to facilitate that.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Harris, did you cover the topics you needed to at that time?
For now, yeah.
Okay, so then I saw Councilmember Martinelli and Councilmember Buxton. Start with Councilmember Martinelli, and then I will go to Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question for the city manager. In the initial recommendations, marina infrastructure was listed as 2 million, and it's now listed as a $250,000 less. Was there a particular reason why that amount was lowered, or is it just pulled to go into something else?
Yeah, it was pulled so that it could be utilized for other services.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I neglected to ask before if you could help, if you might be able to give a little more clarity on what this is in regard to the small business grants that I think it's called TRBC, or the name of the organization that we're considering partnering with, what they can do for our small businesses that SBDC cannot or does not do.
Yeah, well, my understanding, and we were asked if we wanted to participate, and the point is, and I think it's a great point. So I know that the Seattle Chamber would be involved in this. I know the city of Redmond is involved with this because I believe they're getting an Economic Development Administration grant to do this. I know that the port has an interest in this. And what it is that to assure we don't have multiple redundant efforts to support small business that are not in coordination with each other. And so to the degree SBDC does, help small businesses, Rich has to be out in the world making sure all those connections exist. And ourselves, we work with Soundside Alliance, we work with the Regional Tourism Authority, we work with the Southside Chamber of Commerce, right? That's 3 agencies, and then you multiply that, there's probably 20 agencies working on small business throughout Puget Sound. And the concept is, can we coordinate those actions and coordinate the marketing, coordinate the support for small business? That my understanding, and it's still early on in the formation. I know Erica has been going to the meetings where they're trying to discuss what the ground rules look like. But once again, let me reiterate that unless we are assured that any proceeds we put into this come back to Des Moines, it's not something we would continue to participate in. Does that answer your?
Okay, so the next, if I'm correct, would be Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to talk about the police funding, the $1.5 million and some change. I just want to talk about why I support that. I've seen a lot of comments about being fully funded and so forth, but I want people to know some facts that have occurred and that I've witnessed over the time here in the last few years. In 2020 and 2021, the crime rate's about the same. It's actually increasing a little bit. Violent crime's up. But over 2019 in Des Moines alone, it's up 23%. In South King County, it's up 21%. And this is by the National Incident-Based Reporting System that the police department had provided us some time ago. And this is caused by a couple things that I want people to understand. First of all, COVID at the jails, for lack of to say this, and it's horrible to say, but the fact is career criminals are not incarcerated at the rate they were in 2019 as part of the catalyst of the problem. Part of that's COVID at the jails. And that's a problem because if they're not an imminent threat, they're essentially released. Also, as you guys are fully aware, the downgrading of felonies to misdemeanors and outright dismissals at the King County Court level. And of course, some of the recent state legislation that's made it a little bit when normally these types of individuals might have gone to jail where they're trying other methods to help them. Whether they're going to work or not is still to be seen. But the fact is we have more criminals on the streets. So we've seen an increase in crime. The other thing you need to think about is police officers. Right now, they're at their full extent. I've talked to several of them, and if they're exposed to a call where somebody has COVID, they have to be quarantined and they're taken off the force. And also in the inherent portion of their job, they get injured. And that's something, and God forbid they want to take a vacation. So what's happening here is crime is up, particularly violent crime. And even President Biden himself said that some of the money should go to police to help counter the increase in violent crime in particular. And he took some flack for that, but the truth is it is the truth and it is a reality. Now, the sad thing is what police do is we will not arrest ourselves out of this in this situation, but we've balanced it with officers and mental response people to best manage the new policing. The situation is, will we be able to reduce crime? If we can deter it, and sad as it sounds, we're probably going to send it somewhere else. Yes, we need presence from north to south in the city. We're long and narrow and everywhere because we need our police everywhere. And so this is why I support this. There are some people that said we shouldn't use this money for this, and I wanted to justify why I supported it. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Bangs.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say, as it relates to the same topic, I totally agree with Deputy Mayor Mahoney. When it comes to the one-time evidence ban, realizing it's needed, realizing it could be paid for either this way or through our general fund, I don't have a problem with that. I think we have to also take into account that we have decided to spend extra money on certain areas that we currently do on overtime. And so understanding that there's a slim margin there, I totally, as I said earlier, agree that we should have those bodies. We should have what those bodies need to do their job. But I also believe we need to take a look at where they're spending their time. And that's totally up to the chief and his staff, but I totally agree with that. Again, some of those one-time dollars, we've already passed this, it's great. Too bad we couldn't have taken some of it out of the general fund. Wasn't that much, but I'm still in total agreement for that.
Sorry about that. Before we start on the next round of questions, one thing I want to say is that we're doing a great job at getting clarification on each one of these items. And so I'd like to make one more pass through the council, and then I will ask for the vote. because we did have the motion on the table to vote as the stuff at the admin presentation as a block. I think we're doing a really good job establishing an understanding of things that are there. And we've had considerable discussion. We do have other elements to talk about. We have, and I'm hoping to try and move us along to that. But so with that, I see the first hand being Councilmember Harris. Then I see Councilmember Buxton. And I'll check with every council member down the list. So at this point, Councilmember Harris, hopefully this will be your final round.
One can hope. Thank you, Mayor. Could City Manager Matthias, could you explain the rationale behind establishing a nonprofit foundation? What can that mechanism do that simply putting that money into, the Human Services Advisory Committee or some other mechanism might not?
Yeah, so that is not a administrative recommendation. That is a recommendation that you will get a chance to review that came from Deputy Mayor Mahoney and Councilmember Buxton. So you may see that. I don't know if that was in the binder. We took it out.
Oh, okay. It's in the. I'm looking at the Monday.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Councilmember Harris, for brevity, I'll be glad to answer that in a short version if you're okay with that. The idea was that Friends of Saltwater State Park and Trout Unlimited and Destination Des Moines and other entities could apply for a portion of money out of that 100,000 to support their programs.
Okay.
That are not human services.
Okay, how would that differentiate from funding for, let's say, the food bank or other agencies?
Before we go into this, because if I understood City Manager Matthias, this is an item that is under the council proposition.
Correct.
Okay, so
fair point.
and so we're jumping outside of what we're trying to work on.
Absolutely, Mayor. I'm sorry, I got distracted by the shiny penny. I would, I guess. I guess that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a motion to move to withdraw one line item from this before we vote on it as a block, the emergency transitional housing of $300,000. I would like to eliminate that line item and move it to the discussion that we're going to have next. And the reason being is there are a handful of human services related items that will be brought up coming up next. And since this is a pretty healthy chunk of $300,000, it might be nice to have that available as we negotiate some of these other amounts coming up. It may not change at all, but it would be nice to have that available as we work through these amounts in a few minutes. So that's my motion: withdraw line item emergency transitional housing and move it to the next portion of the discussion.
I'm sorry. Is there a second?
A point of order, Mayor.
Yes.
Are we voting on the block and then removing things? How are we doing this?
Well, and to be honest with you, we have already agreed to vote on the block. This would be a supplemental motion to remove a single item, but the council fundamentally did agree to vote on this as a block. So if there is no second, this dies for lack of a second. And the other thing is, I don't know that that money necessarily trickles over. On the council portion of things, we're talking specifically about those items. If there's money left over when we get done, we also have to remember, and I hope Beth Ann is running an adding machine somewhere, because there's a community aspect there as well. And so when you look at, I mean, we can't exceed the amount of the 9 million that we have. The big question comes down is council in favor of pulling a light? If we start going down this path, we are not going to get to the block vote that we agreed to, and we do have a motion on the table to vote. So Councilmember Buxton is asking for an amendment to that motion that was motioned and seconded. And this is discussion around it. She is asking for a supplemental motion. So, Councilmember Harris?
I would provide a second. I also would like to remove the SR3 line item. So I was hoping there would be a mechanism. That's the only other item. I'm in favor of the transitional housing, but I would have no problem moving that to the other discussion.
The problem is, and I'm going to ask for it before we go to the SR3. So we have issue. Attorney George and City Manager Matthias, because these are removed from the block, they're not even represented in the council discussion. So how would we move forward with the disposition of those two items? They would, I don't know how we would address them.
Well, I think that essentially the motion on the table is to approve the entire block, and Councilmember Buxton has made a motion to amend that block to remove the one item.
And we have to deal with that supplemental motion before we can even entertain the possibility of SR3.
Yes, that's correct. So Councilor Harris, he seconded that, but then he added something else, but that just needs to stay where it was for now. He seconded the motion. So you can discuss Councilmember Buxton's motion, or you could call a vote. And then it either stays on the block or it doesn't.
Right. So Councilmember Nutting.
So we have a hard stop at 8 o'clock.
Correct.
I don't see this ending before 8 o'clock.
We can move to extend.
How many times legally can we move to extend?
I believe as long as the council has the votes to extend.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, may I make a comment? Okay, I want to, Councilmember Buxton, I think that the way I would look at what you're suggesting is the 300,000 is part of what's recommended in this block. And if it's passed, then you will be assured there's $300,000 for emergency transitional housing. I don't think that's, like, as the mayor said, I mean, that could maybe be a motion under council member requests. However, it's all still part of the 9 million, regardless of which bucket it's in. And this way assures that it's in there. And I think that the city is well served to spend this money on the type of comprehensive services that will serve a population that is, you know, can potentially live in some type of transitional or emergency housing and get resources and help while they're there. So I don't quite understand the value of moving it elsewhere when it's all the same money.
Did you want a response? Should
Sure.
I respond? It's a large chunk of money. It's in what I consider to be the human services bucket. There are probably 6 or 7 line items that I would consider to be human services related in this allocation. It turns out to be $1.2 million, I think, worth of human services allocations. So since some of those, and then we have a few more allocations that are going to be considered shortly. So depending on how important those things are, it would be nice to have a little bit of wiggle room. So I kind of randomly picked something that even if you wiggle with this $300,000, you still have this huge allocation in emergency and transitional housing. If I pick something like tenant eviction resources with only $150,000 available and somebody wants some wiggle room, pretty soon you're reducing that $150,000 to less. So what I did is I picked the largest item to move it to the next discussion, because we have a large bucket of human services that we are considering. That's my reasoning. It's all going to turn out to be 900,000. It's just where it's going to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'm seeing 3 hands only on this particular motion. So I've got to tighten this up. I see Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Nutting, and Councilmember Martinelli. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, as a point of order, why can't it be the case that we simply pull that item and my SR3 thing and simply vote on them like any consent agenda?
Because we already have a motion on the floor to vote these as a block that was agreed to. So at this point, I have to deal with the motions as they have come. So at this point, I have the motion to remove the emergency housing. Your motion has not been entertained yet because we have to complete this motion. And then I have to go back to the original motion. Procedure.
I understand that, but why can't we simply vote on the, on this $300,000 as a separate item immediately after pulling it, just like a consent agenda, 30 seconds, boom, done.
Because we already.
Okay, all right, fine.
And we have a motion and a second. And these things are coming out of that discussion. So, Councilmember Nutting.
Nothing for me. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say I agree fully with the city manager. I think that I am absolutely opposed to pulling this. This is one of a few items that is desperately needed, and I don't think there should be any wiggle room in regards to reducing the amount. And so I've been very much against this motion.
Okay, seeing no other hands at this time, the motion on the table is to remove the emergency transitional housing. All those in favor of the removal, please raise your hand until I call your name. I see Councilmember Buxton. All those opposed, please raise your hand until I call your name. Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, and Councilmember Nutting. Motion fails. Okay, I am now back up to the original motion to vote to pass this forward as a block. I am in the final round of questions, and the next person is Councilmember Martinelli. Did you have anything you wanted to bring forward on the block?
I wanted to provide an amendment to increase the eviction resources from 150,000 to 250,000, which I think would more appropriately address the need that's forthcoming, especially with the eviction moratorium ending in about 2 weeks. I know the city manager's initial recommendation was 300,000. That was dropped to 150,000. I would like to see it up to 250,000, somewhere in between those two numbers, essentially.
So you are making a motion to increase the eviction. I'm sorry, what was the title?
For the eviction resources, yeah, I'm trying to amend that from 150,000 to 250,000.
So we have a motion made by Councilmember Martinelli to increase eviction resources from 150,000 to 250,000. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Deputy Mayor Mahoney. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. Okay, in favor, I see Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, and Councilmember Mahoney. Deputy Mayor Mahoney, I apologize. Opposed? I see Councilmember Buxton, myself, and Councilmember Nutting. The eviction resources have been increased from 100 in the block from 150K to 250K. That motion has passed. Okay, Mr. Martinelli, does that conclude where you were coming from?
It does, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Bangs?
Yes.
Did you want a last pass at, I'm in the final round. I'm sorry. Everybody has had a chance to speak several times more than.
You're right. And no.
Really gone over this thing. So I'm making my final pass through.
Thank you. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. Thank you.
It doesn't. Councilmember Nutting, did you want another pass? Okay. Deputy Mayor Mahoney, did you need another pass?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm fine. At this point, everybody has had plenty of opportunities. And Mr. Harris, I am not going to recognize.
Wait, we were going to vote on SR3, you know.
That motion was, no, that motion was not recognized. Because you compounded another motion. City manager.
My understanding from the city attorney was that that would be moved to another part of the discussion.
City Attorney George, would you please explain?
Well, I think if you're entertaining, that would be the time.
I would like to amend the budget to remove SR3 from this discussion.
This is the final motion. SR3 removal. Motion was made by Councilmember Harris. Is there a second? Seeing none, the motion dies for lack of a second. We are now back to voting on this as a block. All those in favor of what the administration has put forward tonight in their presentation, we are voting on that as a block. Please raise your hand until I call your name. Okay, I see Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Bangs, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. The administrative portion of this passes 7-0. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been on air for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I am going to take us into recess for 10 minutes and return us back at that would be 7:55. Given that, Councilmember Nutting.
I approve a 10-minute overage on our return.
So I guess are you making the motion to extend?
For 10 minutes past 8 o'clock.
Okay, there's a motion to extend until 8:10. Is there a second?
I'll discuss it.
Okay, so I have the motion by Councilmember Nutting to extend, seconded by Deputy Mayor Mahoney. The truth of the matter is it's not likely we'll get things done by 8:10. But I will, as we approach that time, we will call for another extension. Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Mayor, I'd just like to make the motion that we just go ahead and say we'll go up to a hard stop of 9 o'clock.
There's a motion on the table for a hard stop at 9 o'clock by council.
I will second.
That was made by Deputy Mayor Mahoney, seconded by Councilmember Martinelli. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, I see.
Point of order. Does that mean hard stop at 9? No extensions?
Yes, it does.
No.
The council is voting to end our work tonight at 9 o'clock, and anything that is not completed, we will pick up on at a later time. Motion was made by Deputy Mayor Mahoney, seconded by Councilmember Martinelli. Again, for all those in favor, please raise your hand so I can count you appropriately. Okay. I see Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Bangs, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, and Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Nutting. Those opposed? I see Councilmember Buxton and Councilmember Harris. The motion passes 5-2. We will complete by 9 o'clock. There will be a hard stop.
Point of order, Mayor. Is Beth Ann going to be with us? And does she have a running total of what we have left?
Yes.
We will cover that after the recess, so she can double check her numbers and be prepared for an.
Thank you.
So at this time, it is, according to our network clock here, 7:47. I'm going to go for a 10-minute recess. I will reactivate at what's that? 7:57.